My previous video outlines the process I use to plan and build dioramas. Well, I'm 5 weeks into a 6-week group build, so it's time to complete this project. I've built the essential elements of the base, planned each step, ordered all the components, and then my most critical parts haven't arrived in the mail. It's an absolute disaster. The mailbox is empty. So join me to see how I pivot after a disaster and build a base in less than 2 days. Right, well, this is going to take a little bit of time because what I need to do first of all here is get a base down, because I need the glue to go off and to harden up, otherwise I'll be working on a soft base that's floating around. So, scrap material again, so we're just going to get a piece of XPS foam mounted down to the base. Now this base is going to be smaller than what I originally planned, which means I need to modify the scene completely. It's going to be evident what I'm going to do as we go, but what I need to do is I don't have some of the figures I needed, and I don't have the large trees. And to make the trees that I need for this, I'll have to scratch build them, but I really won't have time because I'm down to 3 days left on this build to go. And I'm going to use at least half of that to build this base, and probably another day to complete the figures that I have. So let's get cracking. So I'm gluing in the balsa front and rear plates here, the sides will go on, and we'll put all those together and set them aside for a couple of hours. I still need to create a hedgerow, so I'm going to have a hedgerow, roadway and an open field in this diorama. So I need to use some foam to build up the height on the hedgerow. There's no point using other materials to do it because it's just a waste of money, where foam is cheap, easy, light, and we can get that to fill up that massive amount of area I need to do that. So using the toothpick method again, we put those in, cut the tips off those, and that's ready to go. Once again, I'm using VMS Smart Mud as the base element for soil and groundwork. This is a fantastic product. I can't recommend this highly enough. It's able to be manipulated to fill all these cracks. You can shape it any way you want. It's an acrylic product, so it's safe to use. It does come out quite moist to begin with. One tip here, if you let it settle in place for about 10 minutes, it will start to firm. You can use a damp cloth or your finger or a sponge to shape that out and get it very smooth if you want to. So moving on to the roadway, I'm using some products here that rail people will be very familiar with. This is a ballast product. It's a very fine stone-like product that you can use to replicate ballast, but for a roadway base, great. I then add a thinner, grey, much finer product in here because I want it to fill in the gaps and produce quite a smooth roadway. In Normandy, most of these roads were unsealed and they were compacted over decades, so that's the appearance we're trying to work with. Next, we're going to set the material down in place, so I need to glue it with PVA glue. So the first step is to use some isopropyl alcohol so that we can relieve the surface tension for the PVA glue to then soak through neatly into that gravel base underneath. Now if we don't do that, the PVA will just float and pool around the top surface. It'll lift off all of that gravel texture, and that's not going to be good because it's just going to eventually settle in clumps, not in a nice smooth base. So with this applicator, you can see that I'm able to apply the diluted PVA exactly where I want it. And then after all of that is dried, I can come back again for another pass with the VMS Smart Mud. And what I want to do is I want to feather this into the edges of the roadway. This will give me a great base for putting down some grass and have deposits of soil there, which we can see. Then I move over to the dirt and soil area itself, where I'm going to apply static grass. Now I'm just using the applicator to apply some more diluted PVA. Doesn't need to be full strength. And then in with the static grass applicator. Now what I'm doing here is I'm using 2 different grass lengths in the applicator, both 4mm and 7mm, just so I can get a nice heavy application, about as heavy as you can of static grass. And the great thing with my applicator is I invested in a pretty good one. So it's got a rubberized handle, won't discharge on me easily, isolates well. So after applying the static grass, I take some of the collected pieces, which were the overflow that's collected in the lids, and with the tweezers I just put some clumps of those in there to break up the scene a little bit. Bearing in mind that while I'm doing this along a drain, the drain's usually moist and the grass grows a little thicker and more lush. The next step is to paint the first coat of black onto the balsa sides, and at the same time I black base the entire diorama base. The idea here is that painting is a very dark colour, and I'm using black, which you could use mahogany or a dark brown for instance. What it does is it then replicates the fact that you don't get light filtering down through the grass to the earth, so it's much darker underneath the top surface of the grass. It gives us the illusion therefore that as we put the green tones back in, that the grass is much thicker, more lush, more dense than it is in real life here on this diorama. Remember, we're trying to replicate a real life situation. So in black, look at that. Okay, let's go through some tips on creating a realistic foliage. From this point, we need to put highlights into the diorama. So I'll use Tamiya XF57 buff to spray a light highlight coat over the top third of the grass. Now it creates a great base where we can then go either way into dry tones or into lush green tones. Here obviously it's Normandy in summer, we're going to put some nice lush green tones in. And the first colour I'm going to use is a mid-tone green, not dark because I don't want to extend that dark base through the top of the grass. I now want to show it as having some light. So a mid-tone green gives us a great base to start with, and we'll build up from there with the lighter tones. The next tone is, I guess, what we'd call a light tone green. It's got a little bit of lime in it, just to brighten it up a bit. And then we have a nice green, lush field to finish with. The next step is we'll move over to the hedgerow. So with the hedgerow, I have an aftermarket product which is fantastic for this in a few different colours or different shades. So we break those into little pieces, trim the ends so that they're level. Just wash those through some CA glue that's on the top of the plastic container and stick that straight down. That's as simple as that. Now trees don't grow in a linear fashion, so they don't just grow vertically, they also grow laterally. So we'll have some fresh growth coming out of the base of the plant as well, which is great because what that does is it also thickens up the hedgerow, makes it a lot more realistic. And the last thing we're going to do here is put in a final, very light highlight. It's a very bright limey green, slight yellow tone to it, so that replicates the bits of sun which will get across the top of the grass. And there we have it, the grass section's done. Now what we need to do is find a special element. When I sat back and looked at this diorama as it was, I thought I need something I can sit down and watch some World War II footage and have a bit of a think about what I might find in Normandy that would be something different, something special, a highlight to draw the eye in of the viewer for the diorama. So watching some footage of Luftwaffe planes taking off to fight against the American 8th Air Force, it struck me that not every plane returns. Parts do get shot off. There's an idea. Let's take something that gets shot off a German fighter plane and have it as it's landed. So I'm going to do a wing. So in my stash I have a 148 BF109. It's an F model, I think. We're going to build up one side of this. Now in the wing root end, I'm going to use some foil. I've cut some sections out and just dummied up a bit of the structure underneath. And using that, we're going to make a shot-off wing. I didn't have any decals, so that was easy enough. I just masked those up myself and sprayed them. And then weathered that with some oil paints and a little bit of mud from the VMS Smart Mud, sort of scraped around inside the wing and that went down. Last thing I had to do was some figures, but I'm not going to show you these. I'm going to do a figure video shortly. And here we have the finished diorama, wing and all. Quite happy with the figures, considering they're Tamiya 1/48 scale figures and they have virtually no distinguishing detail on them. Had to really work hard at getting those. Those 3 figures took me a whole night, about 6 hours to do those. That's quite a bit of effort. Quite happy with the outcome for them though. Here you can see the 2 Cromwells in a short halt on the road to Caen, with the infantry moving up alongside them. Now, all in all, this base took a day and a half to build. I allowed myself 2 days at the end of the build to do this. A day and a half's pretty good. What it doesn't have is one element that I want, and that's some large trees in the back left-hand corner here behind the Cromwells. That's something I'll just have to build later on. And as always, a huge thank you to my Patreons. My Patreons allow me to get the materials and produce these videos for you to see. Please, if you haven't already considered joining, please join our Patreon. And here's a look at an upcoming project that you're going to see very soon. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you again in the next video. Bye bye.